Hi there. Okay, so I said I wanted to make another video about Buffy because Joelle has inspired me with her Buffy loving. Because my friends all get kind of tired of listening to me talk about Buffy, even though they've totally all watched it with me because of how I forced them to do that. Anyways, so I'm going to tell you why it is. I think I mentioned this in my first incredibly bad video about Buffy, or about Jaw stuff. Why it is that Buffy ended up sort of connecting to me very strongly. And I don't just mean the show, I mean like I've actually been like very strongly connected to Buffy the character, which I know is not true for a lot of people. A lot of people don't really like Buffy. But I actually find her to be, I like her. Anyways, so when I was younger, the reason that I connected to Buffy, and I was a teenager when the show started, although I don't think I actually started watching it. The first episode I ever saw was Ted, randomly while I was babysitting, but I don't think I started watching with any kind of regularity until I was like 16 or 17. And by then it was already like in its third season or something. And I never actually, I didn't watch the whole thing until much later. I actually bought the 6th and 7th season before I'd seen them. But when I was younger, the reason I connected to Buffy was because of her and Angel. And because at the time, I had, or shortly before, I had a boyfriend who was older than me, not 220 years older than me or whatever Angel was, but 4 years older than me. And he was older than me, and I was convinced that this was the love of my life. This was the one, this was my soulmate, whatever gag-worthy things you want to do. I got in a lot of trouble with this boy, snuck out with him, and got caught once, and there was a whole thing. But Caleb was his name, and Caleb was sort of my defining person. To this day, I look at a lot of things that happened to me as a teenager, and there were really like two major influences in my life as I was growing up around that time. And one was obviously my family because, you know, I was around them all the time, so they couldn't really help it. And the other one was Caleb, in a much different kind of influence-y way. And I really believed that Caleb was the one, that I loved him and I would marry him, and it's ridiculous because I was 14, 15, 16. But I really believed that. And when I watched Buffy and Angel and this dramatic eternal love, there was part of me that really connected with that and that really did think, yeah, you know, this is romantic. This is all of those things. And, you know, no, we did not have sex and he turned evil. So that was a plus for me. But still, that was the big thing initially. And that stayed true for a while, because even after I was long out of contact with Caleb, he was still sort of this defining force in my life. So then I started to see it in sort of a retrospect, and I started looking at it and saying, okay, so Buffy, Angel was the same thing, that Angel was this intense influence in her life, and she was pretty young, and then he left, and so now she's got all of this like weird sort of this, you know, this weird romanticizing of a situation that, you know, was not actually healthy for her or for Angel, really. I mean, it's not good for either one of them. But we're supposed to believe that this was like, you know, the love of the ages or whatever. And, you know, now I'm older and I look at it and I'm like, he's 200 years older than her. What the hell are they going to talk about? We don't know, because all they ever talk about is killing vampires. I'm just saying, demons, vampires, they don't do anything else. So eventually, you might think that they would have to talk. This is really always the issue with like young teenage girls and vampires, but it struck me with Buffy. So then I'm older and I'm looking back at it and I'm thinking, you know, here was me and Caleb, and this was not actually what I thought it was, but I remember thinking that it was this, and so I was very connected to that. And then, when I first watched the show, season 6 was my least favorite season, aside from the musical and the last like 2 episodes. I was like the finales, but season 6 was my least favorite season. I felt like it just screwed everything up that had been set up. It just felt totally different, and of course there was the attempted rape scene from Spike, which I was just devastated by. I still had not worked out what I thought of Spike's evil, and see my previous rant for that. And I was just really, I mean, it's an awful scene. Joelle's absolutely right. It's totally the worst scene in Buffy. And actually, like, reading stuff about him having to film it and stuff, it sounds like it was pretty terrible on that end, too. So, and I just hated it, and this whole skeezy thing with Buffy and Spike having sex, and it was, you know, the way, how she felt about it, and, you know, having to deal with the real world, and not feeling like she could, and I just felt like this wasn't the show that I liked. And I was really upset about it. So, I really didn't like season 6 at all. The first, maybe 2 or 3 times I watched it. And then, I was watching it a few years ago, and I actually found that I felt like I was in kind of a similar place as Buffy was. I was not having sex with an evil vampire, but I was having sex with someone that I didn't love and that I didn't want to be with. But I just kept doing it because I felt so awful and things were so bad, and I just, it was just sort of cyclical, right? Because I would do this and it didn't make anything better, it made everything worse, but I would end up going there because I didn't have anything else, and it was a bad time. It was a dark time, and trying, you know, and here I am, I'm like 25 or 24 or whatever, and I'm trying to deal with real life, and I don't know how to deal with real life, and I don't know how to be emotionally connected to people, and here, you know, like, I'm starting to get accusations of being cold and of being distant, and of being these things which I can very easily slip into, and I just really, you know, I don't know how to be another way. And so I felt like Buffy actually, what she was going through in that season actually, although it was clearly not the same as what was happening with me, I actually very much connected to Buffy. So it's been one of those things as I've grown up, well, still going, I guess, but as I've been growing up, that I've been able to look at Buffy and be like, you know, that I can relate really strongly to where she's at different points in my own life. And as that I mentioned in the last one, I do think that in the end, Spike was someone, I do think that she loved soul having Spike and maybe didn't even realize it because she was so trapped on Angel and this idyllic idea of what her and Angel had been, even though they're never any good for each other. And he's such a mopey moron, and he's so much better when she's not around, and he can occasionally have a sense of humor, and she's not a bitch, and it's just awful. It's awful, and there, you know, she's not that person anymore. She's someone different. And Spike is actually better for her in that, and I think that had things not gone crazy, she might have realized that. But, you know, when do things not go crazy in Buffy? So, that is my very long-winded, idiotic thing about why Buffy has actually sort of, like, been a defining factor, or sort of reflected defining factors in my life.